Hi there. I'm excited to share this with you. I'll be releasing one chapter of my first book every week until the entire story is complete. You can listen while you're working, driving, or just kicking back in your favorite spot. Some chapters will be short, others a bit longer, but every one of them is free to enjoy. If it's not your thing, that's totally okay, no hard feelings. But if you like it, feel free to tune in each week or even share it with a friend. Can't wait for the next chapter? No problem. Scan the QR code on your screen to purchase the full book on Amazon. Happy listening.
Chapter 3. Visitation. The morning comes quickly for Chad. His sleep was so deep that he did not dream, and he hardly even knew he was sleeping. It was one of those nights where a person wakes up confused about their surroundings, no matter how familiar they are with them. Perhaps all the action of the previous day had exhausted his body, causing it to experience a short hibernation-like process while it repaired itself. Or maybe subconsciously, he was trying to escape dealing with the information that had been given to him by God, so his mind shut down during the slumbering process. But now, morning has come, and any escape that had been attained through sleep was now officially over. Chad gathers his bearings while looking around the room. His eyes fix on a large dresser across the room from him. Its marble top glistens slightly, reflecting the light of the 4 tall windows on the east wall of his room. Atop the dresser is a matching vanity mirror that reproduces his image before his very eyes. Chad's mind begins to catch up with the day as he views the condition of his face and starts to feel the pain of his still aching body. Memories rush into his dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, bringing him back up to speed on the beating he took and how he ended up in bed. It all comes back to him, and he finds himself wondering if his wife came to bed with him last night. A quick look in the mirror reveals that her side of the bed is still in order and looks unused. "Did you hear me, Chad?" The familiar voice of his wife inquires. The sound comes from his right side where the restroom is, the one area he has not even attempted to look since gaining consciousness. "Huh?" he replies as he sits up straight. He turns his head a quarter to the right and sees his wife standing fully dressed in the bathroom doorway. The expression on her face clearly shows that she is waiting for an answer. Chad, however, has no idea what she possibly could have said that precipitated her inquiry. He spins together his thought process, trying to pull the answer from thin air, but the truth is, he did not actually hear anything before she asked him if he heard her. "I said the pastor's in the library area waiting for you," she rejoinders. Chad finally starts to pull things together. "That's why I woke up," he thinks. "Her statement must have awakened me. Okay, I'm getting up, he says. Chad thinks back on his wife's reply and her posture, trying to analyze it to figure out if she is still mad. With his mind just rebooting, his results are inconclusive. Looking at the blue glow of the clock on his dresser, he notices that it is 8:30, and he wonders why his pastor is at his house this early in the morning. Chad yawns, and the movement reminds him that he is injured. Of all the times to get an early morning visit, he thinks. Chad swings his legs around and drapes them over the edge of the bed as he prepares to get up. His bed is tall, and because he is not all the way forward, his feet do not quite touch the ground. Chad scoots forward to get his feet on the ground while contemplating the reason for the pastor's visit. Part of him wishes he could cover up his wounds so that they would not become the topic of conversation. However, coming out with his head wrapped like a mummy does not seem like the way to keep the focus of the conversation off him. Chad does not want to hide the incident from his pastor at all. He tells his pastor everything. Chad reasons to himself that whatever the intended topic, it must be important for such a visit, and he does not want to distract his distinguished guest and friend from the assignment of the Lord. Chad buckles down in his mind, unable to figure out another way, and says, "Nevertheless, your will be done," under his breath as if to himself. He leans forward to put weight on his feet and then stands up. His lower half is still uninjured, and surprisingly, the upper half does not feel as bad as he imagined it would this morning. He looks at his wife, and she is almost expressionless and gives him no clues. He wants to ask her if she knows why the visitor has come a-calling, but he is afraid that she is still off kilter about everything and might snap at him. His feet find their way to the fuzzy slippers he often wears around the house when he needs to quickly attend to a matter. The pastor sits quietly on the soft tan futon in front of the bookshelves. There are hundreds of books on the 3 tall, darkwood finished bookshelves. Almost all the books are Bibles, biblical reference materials, or spiritually based books. As the pastor waits, he looks over some of the titles on the shelf and recognizes that even he does not have some of the books that he sees. The pastor is not fooled, however, because he knows that Chad hates to read and the majority of those books belong to Karen. Karen reads every chance she gets and has indeed read just about all the books that are in the library. Chad, on the other hand. The pastor wonders how he is so well versed on the Bible, with his hatred of reading. The atmosphere is pleasant as it always is, and a sense of peace hovers in the household, no doubt a blessing from God in the opinion of the pastor. The wait seems long, but he does not mind because he knows that this visit is a surprise to Chad. He thinks about what he is going to say and plays a scenario of Chad's responses through his mind. The pastor is unaware of it, but when thinking on such things, he often drops his head and begins to look at the ground while his brain ticks away. All of a sudden appears a pair of feet covering the glossy wooden floor area of the library that he is currently gazing at. As he works his way up the figure before him, he recognizes the familiar form of his friend and member, Chad. Shock and even horror fills the heart of the pastor, however, as his eyes reach the barely recognizable swollen and bruised face of Chad. Chad quickly tries to warn his guest. Now, but it is already too late. The pastor has heard and seen so much since taking his position as a servant of the Lord. He has been at the dying bed of members, counseled broken people and broken marriages, prayed for some in the hospital after terrible injuries, but still he is not prepared for the feeling in his heart when he looks at his friend's face. All his training goes to nothing as he momentarily lets his facial expression convey his true feelings. Chad picks up on the facial clues and switches his approach from warning to explaining. Please don't let my appearance distract you from what you came here to tell me. Even if it is an assignment. That this isn't as bad as it looks. I assure you. I'll have to tell you the story sometime, when you have time, that is. Even in the midst of his current situation, Chad is truly more concerned about the work of the Lord than his own physical condition. Actually, Chad. The pastor says while straightening up and pulling his composure back together. I am here because Karen called me and told me you were hurt. I must admit that I was not quite prepared for what I see, but I am ready now. Tell me what's going on. Is everything all right with you? In his own little way, the pastor was trying to make up for his thoughtless facial expression with words. Chad is indeed overwhelmed by the concern of his pastor. It all dawns on him at once that the pastor has not come to give him an assignment but instead has gotten up early just to come see about his comrade's well-being. Chad is grateful, and his heart feels full. His heart had been set on dutifully receiving an assignment and being a big boy about it all, so to a degree, it was hardened. But now, his defenses are crushed, and his heart is free to be as it normally is when he associates with his pastor. Or so he thinks. Chad starts to answer the question but realizes, before even one word can come out, that he can't tell his pastor the whole story just yet. If he were to tell the story to the end, he would have to talk about what he heard God say to him in prayer, and this was not a good time for that. 1. Talking freely about what he heard could possibly travel into the ears of his wife, Karen. To be sure, she would not like the topic of that conversation because Chad himself is still not comfortable with it. 2. Because Chad has not yet come to terms with what he has heard, telling someone else will only enhance his responsibility to carry out the instructions. It's sort of an accountability thing. Sometimes, a Christian feels more liberty to delay doing what they are told by God when no one else knows that they are supposed to be doing it. It's like planning to take a child to the park. So long as the child does not know about it, if it happens, great. But if not, oh well, maybe next time. However, if the child is told that they are going to the park, their expectation becomes a source of guilt and shame to the one who fails them. That being said, if Chad tells his pastor, then the pastor will hold him to it even though Chad is not fully convinced or ready to receive such a word. As bad as that may seem, there is a third reason Chad chooses not to tell his pastor what he has received from the Lord. 3. What if his pastor thinks that he is going crazy? What if the pastor tells him that God would never say such a thing? After all, Chad has never heard of hero being a calling. He trusts his pastor. Such a claim would definitely make him doubt his ability to hear from God. Yes, he is in denial already, but it is a self-allowed denial. Chad knows what he heard, but because he does not want it to be true or even see the possibility of it happening, he chooses not to fully embrace the truth just yet. It's easier for him to toy with the notion that he has made a mistake. Chad decidedly gives the pastor an abbreviated version of the story so as not to even hint at the word that God had given. Though God had told him multiple things, it is still referred to as the word by Christians. The word does not refer to a specific word from the conversation but means all that God said at that time as a whole. I was coming from my workout and saw some lady being mugged. It's like God led me into the alley to speak on his behalf. Chad recalls. And speak I did. But they, on the other hand, decided to fight. It was 3 young boys. None of them were over 25 guaranteed. They let the lady and her purse go but started beating me up. The cops came, and they ran. You make it sound so mundane. The pastor interjects with surprise in his voice. He cannot believe that such a muddled face would come from a tale so plain. But it's not that the story is disenchanting but more the way that it was told. Well, Chad replied. I'm not making anything up. That's what happened. The pastor looks directly at him as he speaks. One of Chad's eyes is swollen shut completely and the other only half opened. His top lip is swollen mostly on the right side, but his bottom lip was swollen mostly to the left. It creates an asymmetrical imbalance to his face. His talking only makes it worse. Yes, Chad, but it almost seems as if you are hiding something from me on purpose. The pastor notes. Chad is stuck for a moment, as he is well aware that he is hiding something. He cannot lie to his pastor. But he also cannot tell the whole truth yet. He also cannot stall too long and be rude to his beloved guest. Give me a couple of days to heal, and I will come tell you what I got from the whole experience. Chad says in a lowered voice, trying to have his words evade Karen's tympanic membranes. The pastor starts to speak but realizes Chad's intent. But, oh okay. I will wait for you to let me know when you are ready to talk. In the meantime, is there anything that I can do for you? Just pray clarity for me, please. The prayers of the righteous availeth much. Chad says. The pastor stands to his feet and gives a reassuring smile to Chad. To be honest, he isn't even sure that Chad sees him through his swollen eyelids, but he does it nonetheless. I will be praying for you, my friend. He says, reaching forward with both arms outstretched. He draws Chad into an embrace. The embrace is comforting for Chad, and so is the pastor's willingness to wait for Chad to come to him, but at the same time it reminds Chad of how bad his beating was. Pain shoots throughout his upper half at every point of contact. He fights to hold back crying out in agony. He wouldn't want his pastor feeling bad for being compassionate toward him. The embrace lasts for only seconds but feels like eternity. As he feels the pain, it takes him back to the moment when he was being punched and kicked. Take that, you Jesus freak! Replays in his mind over and over. A small feeling of anger creeps over him and almost takes him out of the moment he is having with his pastor. His mind reels back as the pastor disengages the hug. Chad attempts to smile, but it looks more like a grimace. The pastor asks Chad, "Are you okay? Did I hurt you?" Chad replies, "I'm smiling." "Yeah. Don't do that." The pastor jokes with a straight face as he walks toward the door. And with a snicker, he smiles and says, "I will let myself out." He opens the front door and exits the house. The sound of the door closing echoes through the hall. A multitude of thoughts invade his mind as the sound fades. It starts with his acknowledgement of the cold-blooded yet humorous rib that his pastor just laid on him. I do believe he was saying that my smile is ugly. I guess in my current condition, that would be true. Then it progresses to gratitude that his pastor came to see him. But even so, he still showed up. He has always been there for me, even in times where I did not think it was important. Chad has a small flashback of when he achieved high honors with his meteor hammer. When he looked over, there was his pastor in the audience. His flashback is tainted, however. As he sees himself facing off with his opponent, with every swing of the hammer, he hears, "Take that, you Jesus freak!" That slight feeling of anger returns as the scene changes from a weapons tournament to the shady back alley where Chad was assaulted. Chad tries to pull himself together and at the same time wonders why he is feeling so upset. The events have passed now, and it is the next morning. Chad is not used to holding a grudge. Perhaps he is just reflecting his discontentment with hearing God say that he is going to be used as a hero onto his memories of what happened. Yeah, that's it. He concludes. However, it does not abate his animosity toward the villains who would willingly violate the virtue of the innocent. The soft touch of his wife's hand coming to rest on his right shoulder pulls him from his emotional rabbit trail, and he realizes that he is just standing there in the front room even though his guest is long gone. He left pretty quick. Was he upset? She says delicately, "No. Just concerned. Apparently, someone told him I was injured." He says in a humorous, "I know what you did" type of way. Karen smiles a little and walks off. She has had a little time to think about it all and is now better equipped to handle the information she received on the previous evening. Her hostile response to her husband does weigh on her mind, but she would rather just move on than to address the situation. Chad is used to it now. It's not that he likes it, but he is used to it now. In fact, it comes as sort of a relief. It means that things are back to normal. He may not find any closure for the way his wife responded, but at least he can move on from here. Years of being with Karen and working for God have built his forgiveness capabilities to what seems to be a maximum. Yet another reason why he finds it hard to believe that he cannot forgive the guys who recently assaulted him. However, he cannot shake the feeling of animosity. Chad takes a couple of days to rest, heal up, and hear from God. God often speaks clearly when there's plenty of time to listen. Fortunately, Chad makes his money off investments and has no need to take days off work or come up with explanations for his absence.